Hey guys, let's build a quick dashboard in Power BI by inserting charts and some slicers. So once you have your data set in Power BI, which in my case I do on the right here, you can see under fields, we could go ahead and play with the visualizations that we have available. So I'm going to show you the data set really quick just to give you an idea of the one I'm working on. It's a pretty small data set, but I have two of them, and I can kind of pick and choose as we go what's going to look good and what's not. So if we want to build a dashboard, first things first, I typically want to add a title in here. And how do we do that? Under the Home tab, you have this text box option. I'm going to click that, and it will pop up. You can go ahead and format the sizing by just dragging any side. So I'm going to drag that, and then you can also always drag your visuals in Power BI. So I'm going to drag that here to the very center on the top, and I'm going to name this our dashboard for jobs. And then I want to format this. So I want to make this a little bit bigger. Let's make that size 28. I'm going to make this Arial font, bold, and just leave that here. Okay, awesome. So we have a really good starting point. We have our title. We can go in and start adding visuals. On the visuals, there's a lot of things we can work on. You can format your page. I think this is really good to know. You have, if you have color you want to add for your background, if you want to go ahead and add like a wallpaper, especially good if you work for a specific company, you want to add headings. This is a really good place to do that on the format page portion. But if you want to start building visuals, this is where you would do it. In my case, I want to start building some stacked bar charts. I'm going to use some of the clustered column charts. I'm going to show you how to use the tables, and then at the end, I'll also add a slicer to show you how to filter your data set. So let's start with our stacked bar chart. So all I do is I click that, and as you can see, it brings your bar chart on the here, and it's at this point just blank, but you can drag it, and you have to also drag on the right here which fields you want to populate for this visual. So in my case, at first, I want to go ahead and add the job levels as my y-axis. I want to be able to see what are the salaries people are getting in different job levels, right? In my case, the job levels are going to determine the level of the role, the career levels, and then the salary is just going to be the value, the amount. Now, let's say you want to ask for the salary that it's populating here, how is that being calculated? Is it an average? Is it a median? Is it a sum? So on the x-axis here, you can actually click that down button, and it will show you that it is currently a sum. You can change that. You can change that to an average. In my case, I could do that, or I could just change it back to sum, and it's now summing my salaries based on the job levels. Keep in mind, when you have your fields right here, you have this little sum button that determines, that's showing you that that's a value, right? So that's how you can determine if it's going to be calculated as a sum or an average. So in our case, we have our job levels by salary. Now, obviously, we want to make this chart look a little bit more presentable. This is just a basic. So once you have in here, you can also add a legend if you wanted to. In my case, I don't think I have enough data to do that. But if you wanted to, you could also drag a data field here that can add a legend for you. As just to show for an example, I'll show you how to do that. So if I added that as a job ID, it will, color code it and have a little bit legend on the top. Again, in my data set, that doesn't really work well, so I'm going to go ahead and remove it by clicking that X, but that's always an option for you. Now, we have the chart in the data set we need. Let's go ahead and format it. So on the top right here where it says visualization, you have the build the visual, and then right next to it, you can format your visual. It has this little paintbrush icon. So I'm going to click that. And the first thing I want to do is I want to add data labels, right? Because it's really good that I can hover and see what those salaries are, but I wanted to actually write what that salary looks like. Now, right now it's showing it in millions. I don't actually want that. So when I go on data labels, I can go to values, and it's asking me, what are the units I want. I'm going to put that into thousands because it just makes more sense when we're looking at salaries. And I can also make that, format that to be bigger, bold it. Again, we can change into Arial, which is kind of like the font we're going for. You can also change the color of the values and, let's do a little orange, or in my case, let's keep it black because that looks a little bit better. Yeah, so there you go. And then one other thing I definitely want to do here is we have salary by job level, which is good, but I do want to change my title. So we were currently in visual, but on the top right here, again, under format your visual, if you select general, you can click title, and I'm going to change that to sum of salary just to clarify what that calculation is. And I want to align this to the middle. So I'm going to center that job title right there, and I can again change my color of that if I wanted to. And there you go. So I think this looks pretty good. It's giving us the data that we want. It's showing us the job levels and the sum of the data that we want. So let's move on and add another chart. In this case, I'm going to show you how to do the clustered column chart. So I'm going to add that right here. And again, same concept. You drag and drop your fields into the X and Y axis. And again, we have the legend option. This time, I actually want to look at job name. So I'm going to add the job name into the X axis, and I want to, again, look at salaries. So let's go ahead and expand that a little bit, and I'll make it as big as possible. Let's go ahead and format it. I think in this case, I'm going to change the title to salary. I'm going to change this to an average salary. And I'll show you how to do that again. I want to center that. And then go back to our visual. Going to add our data labels and change our values to we're going to change our values to be in the thousands. Okay. There we go. So it's starting to come together, starting to look pretty good. Keep in mind, again, you can always format, using all these. I definitely recommend going in here and playing around with the options that you have. A commonly asked question that I also typically get is, how do I change the colors? Under the visual, under columns, the default is typically the blue color, but you can go in there and change that. So let's say you want to change this chart to be orange, you can do that as well. So go in there and definitely play around with the different kind of formatting options you have. There's a lot of really cool things that you can do to get to the data that you need. And lastly, I do want to just center my title just to keep it consistent with the others. Okay, it's starting to kind of come together. Now, as you saw on my data set, it's a pretty small data set, and sometimes the questions that we get are high level, but sometimes they want to look at it on a table. They want to know who are the people and what are their salaries, right? So, this is really high level. It's not really giving us that data. How do we get that data? I would say a really good way to visualize something really specific is using the table function. These visuals, you have this matrix, and then you have this table that you can also use. So I'm going to click table, and in my case, I'm going to actually use full name and again salary, and I'm going to drag both of those under the column section, and you now have a table of the people and their corresponding salaries. Now again, we can format this, right? So there's different ways to do it. You can go in and do your column headers. You could do your totals, if you want your totals to be a specific bigger. Okay. You could do style, and this is really cool. Typically you could do alternating rows that makes it look better, or bold headers. There's just like some really cool stuff that you can do to make it look better. So it's, we have 3 different charts in here. Another really commonly used chart is typically the donut chart. So I'm just going to really quickly show you how to do that one as well. So you could do the pie chart or the donut chart. Let's say you want to add in here job. I would say let's do job level, and then we'll do salaries. So again, so we're looking at it in a different way now, right? Because it's kind of similar data we have on here, but let's say you wanted to look at which job levels are getting the most salary, you could do that. And let's say we want to change this from a sum to an average because we want to look at the average. So really cool stuff you can do. There's a lot of different visuals you can use. But I just want to touch on one last thing. A lot of questions that we typically get in the corporate environment is it's cool that we have all this data, but how do we actually add in slicers and filter to get to the data set that we need? In the visual portion right here, there's this little icon that has a funnel on it. It's called a slicer. I'm going to click that, and this is now showing you what field do you want people to be able to slice and dice your data with. In my case, I want to be able to do that by job name. And as you can see, it's showing you the option to go in here and select, data manager. If I do that, all my charts are now updated to show data manager. I can unselect that by clicking again. And I know this is always not the prettiest option. So if you wanted to, you could format your visual and you could make it into a horizontal. So it would look something like this. And you could put it on the top here if we moved our title, and you give people the option to kind of just select, right? So there's a lot of ways visually that you can do this to make it look a little bit better. Another really cool function with the slicer is that you can single select, or you can actually also search. So you have the option to go in there and add a search for people to type up what they're looking for. So in our case, if we're looking at legal analysts, they could search legal analysts and it will filter by that. And then in my case, I typically remove the title from my slicer just because it looks a little bit better visually. But I could also like add a little bit of background, format it in any way that might look a little bit better. Keep in mind, again, Power BI is really intuitive. So there's a lot of different ways you could do this. I could change it vertically as well and just move this back in here. But that gives you an idea of, different ways to filter your data and go in there. So yeah, that's just a really high level. Please join our other sessions to learn more.